Good morning. I'm happy to be here. I think this is maybe fourth or fifth year that I've had the opportunity to come to United South to speak to students a little bit about my career and some of the things that I see in the line of work that I do as district attorney. Talk about some of the duties that I have, responsibilities that I have, and share with you, some stories, some ideas, get some feedback from you guys. As most of you here, I would imagine, are juniors and seniors. Raise your hand if you're a senior. Okay, so the majority of you here are seniors. Juniors, any juniors? Okay, so the majority of you guys here are seniors. You're getting ready to graduate here in June, and to go on to pursue maybe more education, hopefully going to college or getting into the workforce, maybe getting into the military, maybe wanting to pursue a career in law enforcement. Anybody here interested in law enforcement? Raise your hand if you're wanting to get into law enforcement, which is what I do right now, law enforcement. Raise your hand if you're interested in law enforcement. Okay, so we got a good number of people here interested in law enforcement. And that's great. That's really good. I could share with you some ideas of some of the work we do with law enforcement. My job as district attorney is to enforce the laws of the state of Texas. Everything from the most minor crime. Minor crimes could be shoplifting or criminal trespass, to some of the most serious crimes. And what are some of the most serious crimes in our society? Anybody have any ideas of what are some of the more serious crimes? Raise your hand if, yes. Homicide. Probably one of the most serious crimes, obviously, in what we see. And last year in Laredo, I think there was 14 homicides. All of those homicides come to my office. And a homicide is a murder. In the 20 years that I've been an attorney, I've seen many cases, and I've handled many cases involving every type of crime, including murder. And those cases are always very difficult cases, they're very complicated cases. I could share with you some information, stories about different murder cases that we've handled and how we put a murder case together when somebody is murdered. The most difficult cases that I have is when it involves a child. Unfortunately, sometimes people commit crimes, and we've had cases where children are murdered. Anybody ever hear about the baby Catherine Cardenas case? And I've done a presentation here on that case before, but she was 2 years old and she was kidnapped, raped, and murdered. Anybody ever hear about that case? That was a very difficult case that I dealt with, and it was back in 2009 that she was murdered here over in West Laredo, over on the street called Blair Street. And the murder suspect, ultimately the defendant who was convicted, he was 16 years old. Jose Eduardo Lalo Arredondo. Was his name, Lalo Arredondo, and he was sentenced to 3 life sentences, and the sentences were stacked, so he will be eligible for release when he's 92. He did not get the death penalty because the death penalty in Texas can only be applied if the defendant is 18 or over. So, although he was classified as an adult and he was handled in my office, the most we can give in a case like that is life. And we were able to get the cases stacked one on top of the other. And in all the years that I've been practicing law, that was probably the most difficult case for me to handle, because it was truly, truly, truly an innocent little angel who was just without really comprehension and understanding. She was brutally murdered. And when I think that I won't see another case like that, then I'm out to lunch one day on September the 11th of 2014. I remember the day. I'm driving. I think I was just leaving Whataburger, and I get a call from Laredo Police Department that they just found in a little shallow grave behind Mary Help, behind the Target over there on Del Mar, in a field where they're doing construction, a little grave, and a little 3-year-old, Jaslyn Valdez, in her little pajamas, buried where she had been killed. And that just changes it just ruins your day. It's a situation where you're going about your business. All of a sudden I get a call. So I'm in a suit. I go over there behind the 2 water tanks behind Target, and I see the tent. The police are there, the crime scene investigators are there, and I walk over there, and the medical examiner is on her knees, and she has a little, like a paintbrush and a little shovel, like an archaeologist, and she's cleaning the bones, and she's dusting. And I see the little girl's hair, long hair down to the middle of her back. I see her pink little socks, and we have a murder case. Here in Laredo, how does that happen? Why does that happen? Sometimes you never know. Sometimes I never get the answers to why or how somebody can do this to a child. The bottom line is we have a murder in my jurisdiction, and now we have to hold those people accountable. That case right now is pending in my office. There's 2 suspects, which is the mother and the mother's boyfriend. From Chicago, Illinois, they had come down here, and they were going to purchase a car. Something went wrong. They were in the Monterrey Inn Hotel on San Bernardo. And the evidence, we believe, is going to show that the boyfriend took baby Jaslyn into the bathroom and just beat her. When he brought her out, she was barely breathing. She was having trouble breathing. She was unconscious, and she was put on the bed, and she died. From that point, they took the baby, wrapped it in a blanket, and they take her little body and they go bury it behind Target. So that's the world that I live in. Those are the types of cases that we see. And it's always changing. The world is a very dangerous place. Each of you here in your own lives perhaps have known people, have heard of stories, neighbors, relatives, friends, that maybe something's happened to them. There's a system that deals with it. It's the criminal justice system. Ultimately, every case starts with, just like in TV, what happens if anybody here sees a crime in progress or finds that a crime just occurred? What do? Anybody? You dial 911. You dial 911. Police officers arrive. They begin to conduct an investigation. They look for evidence. What is evidence? Anybody here have any ideas of what is evidence in a crime scene? Excuse me, stand up, please. What's your name?
Justice.
What's your name?
Justice.
Justice, okay, how appropriate. And what do you think, what type of evidence would you look for at any crime scene?
If it was monte, it would pretty much be something that would go in a bedroom, probably the blanket, maybe they wrapped her in. That would be evidence considering connected to the hotel, because each hotel has probably specific brand, specific color that they have to order for each room. So something that just would be out of place.
Okay.
Something different.
Very good. That's a great idea. Looking for, that's what you would call physical evidence. In addition to physical evidence, what other type of evidence can you think of, anybody that you find in a crime? Anybody? Fingerprints. Fingerprints is always a big issue. I say that because juries typically always want to see fingerprints. And I always instruct the police officers and detectives that I work with that always make an effort to lift fingerprints. The biggest misconception that we have, I think, as a public, is that we believe that there will always be fingerprints, and that's not really the case. It takes, and Mr. Atwell's a fingerprint expert. He could always tell you about how really difficult it is to get a really good matching print, you know. I think about in the case of baby Catherine, she had some smudge marks on her neck where her little 3-inch neck where she was strangled, and there was some fingerprints around her neck. And when they did the super glue technique, anybody know what that is, the super glue technique? Okay, I don't really know how it works. Mr. Atwell could probably explain it better than I can, but there's a certain chemical in the super glue that sticks to the oils that our body produces from our fingers. And so then you put it under I guess it's like a black light, and it lights up, and you could see fingerprints. Like in her case, we were able to, once they put her in a Rubbermaid box, one of those plastic boxes, and they covered her and they put the super glue in there, and they heated it up, I could see the little smudge marks around her neck. Now, it didn't match the suspect. It didn't match Arredondo because they weren't good prints, but it did prove that she was in fact strangled, and we had other evidence that put Arredondo as the murderer. Fingerprints. Any other type of evidence that you guys can think of that you look for in a crime scene? Hair samples. You get into forensics, right? What can you get from hair? What's real big right now? I heard somebody say DNA. That's always very important. In that particular case also, we were able to get DNA from blood. And a lot of people compare, and it's very unique. Every single one of us here have DNA that's unique to us as individuals. So it's even stronger than fingerprint evidence that if you find a DNA that matches the suspect, just like we did in the case of baby Catherine. In that case was also interesting because her blood was on his pants, so she marked the killer with her blood. And even though he washed his pants with Clorox and detergent, according to the forensic specialist from San Antonio, it was a miracle, but he was still able to find blood that matched baby Catherine's blood on the pants. Okay, so even though the guy put him in the washing machine and tried to destroy the evidence, that evidence was very compelling. That evidence was very strong to the jury, saying, hey, wait a minute, you had the baby's blood on your pants, you know? And those pants had been hidden at his apartment, and the police officers were eventually able to find the pants, and we were able to send that off to the laboratory. So it was very, very strong evidence. What else? What other types of evidence is good? And let me give you a hint, we live in an age of technology, right? And what do we have? Everyone has cameras and phones, right? You can't go anywhere. I don't care if it was the Boston bombing, the Boston Marathon bombing, where they went and they started looking at all the cameras and they were able to see the suspects moving through the crowd, right? Well, in Laredo, just like in any other city, Laredo Police Department, Sheriff's Department, they utilize the phones, they utilize videos, they utilize cameras that are all over town. So in the case, again, I go back to that case, in that particular case, we had video footage of them going to the gas stations, buying beer, going in at 3:30 in the morning to get munchies. We had the video cameras. The police officers were able to comb the neighborhood, and through the statements taken from the people that were there that night. What did you do that night? Well, we went here, we bought beer, we went there, we went to go get snacks at 3:30 in the morning. You go get the cameras and you start seeing and you start putting the pieces together. So video camera evidence is very, very critical. It helps put the person at the scene. Even when you cross intersections, I don't know if you've seen, there's cameras up there. Border Patrol utilizes a lot of cameras along the border. If you're traveling on 35, there's cameras as you go in north, as you're coming south. There's the photo that takes with the laser, takes a picture. All of that information is information that comes into law enforcement. One of the big areas, and I know that all of you guys and a lot of people like to utilize this, is social media. Okay? All of your social media, law enforcement has access to social media. Even if you delete your social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all this stuff, we utilize through subpoenas, through requests, through the courts, that if you are a suspect in a case, that we can go and take the information through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, where they will give us all of your activity. All of your activity. And that's a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful tool because we as humans, we become comfortable. Oh, well, I've got a passcode. I've got a security code to get into my Facebook account, whatever. A lot of this comes up in cyberbullying, where we have cases of people harassing other people posting pictures against other people that are compromising, that are meant to hurt people, threats, people who record their crimes. And what do I refer to? And I'll tell you the story, a real life story of this other case, where this one individual, this one lady, enjoyed drinking alcohol and partying, and ends up killing somebody. She ends up killing somebody. So we go to her social media, and the case takes a year to go to trial. Throughout that time, we are monitoring her social media. Throughout that time, we start to see a pattern of behavior through her social media. That pattern includes going out, going to nightclubs, partying, taking selfies, taking shots, hanging out with friends, getting drunk. And as she's posting all this information, law enforcement is bringing it in. Okay? So when you go to court and she sits there like she's in church and tries to say, you know what, it's not me, it's not my character, I'm sorry, this, that, the other, we're able to show the jury a different picture. You know. And think about being in that very difficult position of having a prosecutor like myself putting those pictures in front of you and saying, tell us what you're doing here. Tell us what you're doing here. Tell the jury what you're doing here. Where were you on this day? Just 3 months after you killed somebody, what were you doing here? How do you explain that? How do you rationalize that if you're sitting in that stand and, you're being charged with intoxication manslaughter and you did not change your life? You continued on the same pattern. And you have a jury of 12 people who are going to make a decision as to what the punishment is. Do you think the jury's going to have sympathy for you? Anybody? What do you think the jury's going to do in a situation like that? Let me just take a 2-minute intermission and ask Mr. Garza, did we get something? Okay, so what I want to do is, and Mr. Garza is going to help me out, I'm going to do a sample jury selection, okay? When you become 18 in the state of Texas and you're registered to vote, you have your driver's license, you qualify for sitting on a jury. And what do you think you do on a jury? Anybody here want to answer that question? What do you do on a jury? Raise your hand. What do you do in a jury? Miss Justice, what do you do in a jury?
You weigh facts to against the defendant. You weigh facts against the defendant and choose if he's guilty or not for the appropriate sentence.
Okay, so you
sit down and listen to the case.
Okay, I've got several answers here and they're all right. You're going to evaluate facts. You're going to sit down, listen, and you're going to make a determination to determine if somebody is what? Guilty or what? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. And this is something. This is something that when I started as a student, I used to think the same thing. But in our criminal justice system, under our Constitution, where everyone is presumed innocent in this country under our Constitution. So when you go to trial, the purpose of the jury, the function of the jury and their job is to determine if you're guilty or not guilty. It's not guilty or innocent because everyone is presumed innocent. So when you start a trial, I don't care if it's a traffic ticket. I don't care if a cop stops you and says, hey, you were going, Mr. Gonzalez, you were going 45 in a 40, and you know for sure that you were going 35. You can go to a traffic court and you can ask for a trial. And they have to prove that you are guilty of violating that law. There's a presumption of innocence. So it's weighing the facts. And I can tell you, and hopefully one day you have the opportunity to sit on a jury. It's one of the biggest privileges we have of being in this country. Everybody I've ever spoken to, and I've never had the privilege of being on a jury. Think about that. And for whatever reasons, I mean, if you're a lawyer and they call you on a case to be on the jury, they don't want to pick you. So I've never been selected, but I get the opportunity to try cases before juries. And people always say, well, you know what, Mr. Alaniz, it was exciting. It was very exciting, or it was interesting. It was a learning experience. It was, things of that nature, adjectives that say that it was a positive experience. So that's what I believe that most people that serve on a jury, what they take from it. Now, this is the case of State of Texas versus Elisa Cristina Garza. The criminal jury trial has different participants, players, people who take part in the case. The purpose of a criminal trial is, for the state of Texas, is to seek truth and justice. We want to find out what the truth is. This process that's called voir dire, if you all were summoned to court, if we were in a courtroom and we're trying to select 12 of you to sit in this case, and that's the way it happens. You get a card in the mail. It says you must report to the courthouse. Once the court qualifies you and says, okay, are you 18? You've never been convicted. You're registered to vote. You're of sound mind, good character, then no criminal record. Then you go into the phase where you get into the courtroom, and the attorneys like myself will make the presentation to you. In this group of you, maybe there's 50 of you here, my job is to try to find 12 people that could listen to the evidence, will be able to sit in this case. This case is going to take about a week. It's going to start every morning about 8:30, and we'll go till about 5 o'clock. We'll take a 1-hour lunch break, and we'll be bringing witnesses and evidence to prove intoxication manslaughter. The purpose of today is to give you the opportunity to ask me questions. The purpose of today is to find out if, in fact, if this type of case is a good case for you to be a part of. Because there just may be experiences in your life that you have opinions or you have feelings that you just want to say, you know what, Mr. Alaniz, I don't think I could be fair in this case. I don't think that for whatever reason, I wouldn't be a good case in an intoxication manslaughter. For example, I had a relative when I was a kid that was hit by a drunk driver and suffered some injuries. And when something hits close to home, do you think it makes an impression on you? And it makes you feel a certain way, right? And there may be experiences in each of your lives that when you hear this type of case, maybe it could be a physical assault case, maybe it could be a burglary case, maybe it could be a child abuse case, that you say, you know what, I feel so strongly on this case that, can I talk to you? Because what we need 12 people that are able to sit, listen to the evidence, be fair. Be fair to Ms. Christina Garza, be fair to the state, and say, Mr. Alaniz, show me the evidence. Show me all the evidence that you have. If you want me to find Ms. Garza guilty, and you can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, then I'll give you my vote. If you don't bring the sufficient evidence, then I'm going to find that she's not guilty. And ideally, what we're trying to do is get people that are going to be able to listen and do their job without being swayed one way or the other because of a personal experience. And that's what we're looking for. So there's no wrong answers. We need opinions, feelings, and beliefs. If there's anything sensitive that you want to talk to me about, we have the opportunity to go before the judge and explain to the judge. In this particular case, it could be where somebody says, Mr. Alaniz, I've got an issue. I want to talk to the judge. So I say, okay, let's go ahead and come on up here. We go up to the judge. Judge is sitting here at the bench, and we bring the person up here. And I ask the person, okay, what is the issue? Okay. Excuse me. So a sensitive issue like that, a person wants to come and talk in private and say, Judge, I had a family member who was killed by a drunk driver. And it's a very personal situation for me. Right now I'm very upset, nervous about this whole thing that I'm here for, and I didn't know it was going to be intoxication murder case, manslaughter case, and I can't be fair to Ms. Garza. I cannot be fair. And I'm just, because of what happened in my life, I'm gonna have to, I'll probably just vote guilty. You know. Thank you so much. Please have a seat. So the judge would probably scratch that person off, and understandably so. Okay. It's very critical. We live in Laredo, Texas. We know a lot of people. You may end up coming across individuals that you know, people that are witnesses. Is anybody here family members who are law enforcement officers? Uncles, parents, neighbors, things of that nature? Well, remember I told you there's a lot of participants in the trial. You have the defendant, Ms. Garza, you have a defense attorney, you have prosecutors like myself, you have witnesses, the victim, and also pretrial publicity. What's pretrial publicity? Anybody want to tell me what pretrial publicity is? What's that? The media. The media. Why is that so important, folks? Why do you think pretrial publicity is so important? Because I'm going to ask you, has anybody here, please raise your hand if you've heard about this case. Right? Because the media covers the cases. You open up the newspaper today. I didn't get to read the paper today, but I'll bet you there's crime on the front page. I'll bet you there's crime on the front page. Every single day. Every single day. Just like last week, or 2 weeks ago, you get the newspaper, open it, child run over, hit and run. Saw that on the paper. Cartel member arrested. A person expected to plead guilty. And then you open it up to the third page and you see more crimes there. Child left in car unattended. Child found roaming the street. Man arrested for assault. Person arrested for criminal trespass. And there's an article, right? Sometimes that article may make you form an opinion and say, no, this guy's already guilty. Well, it's just the newspaper article. Does a newspaper article contain all the information of a case? Not at all. Not at all. And you always have to know that newspaper articles, they don't tell the whole story. And that's what pretrial publicity is. What is intoxication manslaughter? Under the Texas Penal Code, a person commits an offense if the person operates a motor vehicle in a public place, is intoxicated by reason of that intoxication causes the death of another by accident or mistake. Accident or mistake. So what am I telling you folks here? That when you are intoxicated, do you have to intend to kill somebody? Is it your purpose when you go out and party that tonight I'm going to go get drunk, I'm going to a ranch party, I'm going to a prom party, and I'm going to go take shots, and I'm going to go smoke, and get behind the wheel, and kill someone? Would anybody here plan on that? No. Well, guess what? The law says that intent is not required. You do not have to intend to kill somebody. And you can, at the time when the collision happens, like a plane crash happens, and there's car parts everywhere, and they take you to the hospital, and you want to say it was an accident, the law says that if it's through intoxication, it's manslaughter. So it does not require your intent. It does not require your intent. Intoxication There's different forms of intoxication, but basically it's losing use of your mental faculties, not having normal use of your physical faculties, having also, look at what it says there, or having a blood concentration of 0.08 or more, or alcohol concentration, the BAC, blood alcohol concentration. The law allows the state of Texas, and people will always say, well, hey, if they pull you over, don't blow. Don't take the breathalyzer. Right? Well, you know what? I don't need the breathalyzer when you ran over a mailbox, you hit a big rock, went through a fence, ended up with your car in a ditch, and on the video camera, you're stumbling on the video camera in front of the police car. You could say, well, I refuse the blood alcohol, but I think a jury's going to say, well, God, you can't say I was texting, sir, and go through that type of crash, And guess what? It's 4 a.m. I think that most juries are going to believe that when the officer says there was alcohol on the breath of the individual, that you look at all the evidence that we can prove that you were intoxicated. And that's where you get qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative does not require a blood alcohol concentration. And quantitative, that's where we can prove it with a 0.08. The investigation. When we go to trial, when the state of Texas brings a case to trial, many times the state is put on trial itself. What do I mean by that? The defense attorney is a lot of times going to say, hey, well, the police officers, they messed up this, they messed up that, the lab screwed this up, And all I can say, and what we always ask for in any criminal trial, is to be fair. Is anybody here perfect? Maybe, some people think they're perfect, right? You may know somebody who says they're perfect, but nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. The police officers are not perfect. Why? Because they're human. Do humans make mistakes? Okay, humans make mistakes. Mistakes will be made. Is it possible? Imagine you're a police officer, crime scene investigator. You've been on the force for 10 years. You're a veteran already. You've been on the force for 10 years. You go out to a crime scene where there's a shooting at a club. And there was a lot of chaos. People ran out. Okay? And there's 100 pieces of evidence in actuality at this nightclub. Is it possible that during your crime scene investigation, is it possible that you won't find all 100 pieces? If you all are on this jury, what is a reasonable amount of pieces of evidence from a crime scene that you think would be sufficient for a crime scene investigator to be able to find and still be able to prove the case out of 100 pieces? Anybody? With 50? Anybody think 50 is too low? Now, think about it. We're trying to prove a crime. We're trying to prove that somebody's guilty. 86? 90? Look, the point is there's no right or wrong answer. Each and every one of you may have a number in your head that you think, well, Mr. Alaniz, I don't know how many pieces, but at some point in time, your investigators, hopefully they got enough that I'm able to see what the picture is. And what is this picture? That's an elephant. Is it missing? And you see that it's missing pieces of the puzzle. And so a criminal case is a lot like a puzzle. My job and the police officers who work this case, their job is to go out and collect all the pieces of the puzzle. But I'm going to tell you right now, that there's always pieces missing. There's always pieces missing. Does that mean that the crime didn't happen? No. And it's just like this puzzle. At some point in time, each of you is going to say, you know what, Mr. Alaniz, you proved the case. I know that the defense attorney said that you missed this, missed that, whatever it was, but I could still see that we proved the case. Credibility. What is credibility? What is credibility? Anybody here want to let me know what they think credibility is?
Can you rely on it?
Can you rely on it? Is it reliable? All evidence can vary in credibility. There's testimony, there's scientific, physical, documentary. Okay? Whoever's on the jury has to decide if the evidence is credible. One of the most obvious forms of evidence is testimony. And if you're on the jury, what do you try to look for from the testimony of a witness? Okay, their emotion. Ultimately, what are you trying to decide if they're telling? The truth, right? So in the process, you use your personal experiences. Everybody caught anybody in a lie? Your brother, your sister, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. You know, you go through this process and where that story just doesn't add up and you use your experience and say, no, you know what, you're lying, you know. We as attorneys, we ask questions to determine the credibility of what a witness says, and then ultimately, if you're sitting on that jury, you'll decide, you know what, I believe this person, I don't believe this person. And that even applies to the police officers. Could you be in a case where a police officer lies? Yes? Yeah. Police officer can lie. And you be in a case where the person accused of the crime is going to lie. Yeah. We're all human. Your job on the jury is to determine who is being credible. Okay? The burden of proof. The state, like I said at the beginning, always has a burden beyond a reasonable doubt. You know, look what it says here, no doubt or beyond all doubt would require your presence at the crime scene. The point that this slide says is that you cannot, as a juror, say that I'm 100% convinced that it happened, or require the state to say, well, I brought you 100%. Because in order for you to be 100% convinced that it happened, you would have to what? Be there. You would have to be there. You would have had to seen it with your own eyes. If you saw it with your own eyes, what would that make you? A witness. A witness. You would be a witness to a crime. It reminds me of that one time, that one case I did of a prom party where this one defendant pulled out a gun and shot 9 times into the crowd, and he was with his friends. There was a rumble, and they were going to fight. There was 2 high schools. One of the high schools went to go crash the party on the other side of town, and it was just going to be a fist fight. But this one guy takes out the gun, and he just starts shooting random, and all the guys that were with him, well, they're witnesses, and then people who were there also and got a look at him, that he was wearing a red, one of those red Christian shirts. His haircut was a certain way. We had to bring in all those kids and get statements. Eventually he was caught and taken to trial. There was this one kid, Garcia, who was standing under the palapa, just having a good time there with his friends, that when the fight broke out and the guy started shooting into the crowd, he got shot underneath the eye, and the bullet came out behind his skull, his head, and he died right there underneath the palapa. And, you know, he was only 19. He had nothing to do with the fight. So you could be a witness in those particular cases. The defense in that case was the kid was trying to say, well, they took out a gun first, so I shot back. But in all the evidence that when the crime scene investigators showed up, he had a 9mm semi-auto handgun, and the only cartridges or shells that we found, that the police found in the patio, were which ones? Were his. Because the gun was recovered and the casings matched the gun. And his theory that there was some other guy wearing a white t-shirt who took out a gun and also fired, that was just a lie. That was an attempt to try to prove that he was protecting himself and his friends by firing the gun. And the jury found him guilty. The bifurcated trial, look at this word bifurcated, it's 2 parts. You have the guilt, and this should say the guilt and not guilty phase. Shouldn't say innocence, but because I said every presumed innocence. And the sentencing or punishment phase. So every time there's a trial, the first job you have as a jury is to determine if the person is guilty or not guilty. If you reach that verdict, then there's another little separate trial where you'll be able to decide what the punishment is. Okay? And a lot of times the jury has to, they have to go in there and come up with that number. 99% of the times, I'm going to ask for a number. And typically, I always ask for the highest number. It's very rare that I don't ask for the highest number. And in Texas, for murder, it's 99 years or life. And I think the Texas Department of Corrections measures life at 60 years. So you can figure how the range is. For intoxication manslaughter, the maximum, well, let me ask you, knowing what the definition of intoxication manslaughter is, meaning either by accident or that you unintentionally, but you cause this crash that results in the loss of life, what do you think the maximum time of punishment is under the Texas Penal Code? Anybody? Just give it a guess.
35 to life.
No, it's not 75 to life. And I think one of the big issues here is the fact that it lacks that criminal intent. Okay? It lacks that criminal intent. It's different that if I plan out to go and hurt somebody or kill somebody and I plan my crime, or I'm going to go rob the bank and I develop my scheme, get my car ready, get the guns ready, how I'm going to go in and ask for the money and all those planning stages, right? Most of the time there's an intoxication manslaughter, it happens without any planning. The only thing the person's thinking of is having fun, going out, having a few drinks, maybe they get drunk and then they get behind the wheel. So the legislature has to decide, well, what should be the maximum for that? So it's not 75. Any other guesses? Any other guesses? If you were a legislator, what do you think? What type of maximum crime do you think or time would you want to put on this type of case? 25? 30? Those are pretty close. The state of Texas has established the time at 20 years. At 20 years is the maximum amount of time you can get for intoxication manslaughter. The defendant's right, the Fifth Amendment right not to testify, the presumption of innocence, I talked about this, the right to discovery and equal subpoena power. It's very critical to know that the law does not hold a failure to testify against the defendant basically, you could sit during your trial and not have to say a word because the defendant has no burden. The state has to prove the person guilty. Okay? Let's talk about if you were mistakenly identified as being somebody who committed a crime. Okay? And you go to trial. What are some reasons maybe that somebody, any person, would not want to get up in a chair, up on stage, sit down, have to face the questions from somebody like me who's going to go after him hard, and have to tell a jury for an hour of questioning every little thing that was going on? Why wouldn't somebody want to do that? Anybody? What are some normal reasons? That what? Oh yeah, well if you're not guilty, why even bother? Why even bother getting up there? Okay. Well, she says, what about if you get mixed up during the questions? Okay, what else? Just what else do you think? Those are good responses. Can you see in a situation where people get nervous from public speaking? What's that? Stage fright. That's a very good response. Stage fright. How many of us can get up in front of a full courtroom with the jury and the judge and not get nervous, right? What happens when some people get nervous? Stutter. You stutter. What else? So anybody know? Some people get sweaty hands. You get nervous. Your expressions. Or what if sweat starts just coming down your cheek? You know, because you're so nervous about it. What can that be perceived as? What can the jury say? You're lying. He looks, did you see him? He was sweating. Did you see how he kept playing with his hands? Did you see how he kept looking down? The guy was all freaked out. He's guilty. Hey, wait a minute. You know, that's not completely fair. Now, if I had to defend somebody and I have to make the decision with my client, hey, listen, you can get up and testify, or you could stay seated down, but let's go over your testimony. Do you have any situation? Do you get nervous when you do public speaking? Are you going to get up and start sweating profusely, or start stuttering, or trembling? We need to cover all those bases, you know. So the law says you don't have to testify if you don't want to. The range of punishment, 2 to 20 and up to a $10,000 fine. Okay. And again, the jury decides this range of punishment, but you've got to also, when the time comes, decide, well, why? Well, what are we trying to accomplish in this? The retribution, which is, we have to make this right for the victim. There has to be some recompense. There has to be some consequence to help the victim. Punitive, there has to be punishment. Deterrence, so that it doesn't happen again. We need to show the community, we need to show people, we need to show young people that if you're going to drink and drive and you take somebody's life, there's going to be harsh consequences. Because you have a choice right now. You guys have a choice before prom night right now when you go out to make plans. Hopefully it's not to drink because it's against the law. You drink, you're already playing with fire. You drink, you're already going to be treated as an adult. You crash, you're going to end up in my office. And it's not a place where you want to be. it's not a place where you want to be. Because my responsibility is to the state of Texas. My responsibility is to the people of the community, to the moms and the dads, and all the students, and all the people who obey the law, and all the children, that if somebody goes and breaks the law, then I have to hold them accountable. Accountable. Probation's an option. Real quick. There's so many factors that come into making a punishment. But I'll finish with saying in the case of Christina Garza, Elisa Cristina Garza, who had no criminal history, that on November the 23rd of 2011, when she was at a ranch party and got drunk and killed Derek Trevino, who was 19 years old. And he worked for Domino's Pizza, and he was delivering his pizza, the last delivery of the night. And over there by the overpass on Loop 20 and I-35, when he was coming back from delivering a pizza in the Mines Road area, she came down the street. She was incredibly drunk and intoxicated. She ran the stoplight. She T-boned Derek's little car. Derek's car flew about 150 feet. And he died on the way to the hospital. All of his major organs had ruptured. His heart had, his aorta and other major organs had been severed. And he died. Okay? I asked the jury for the maximum term of punishment for Christina Garza, which was 20 years. We presented all of the evidence, the crime scene evidence, the crime scene sketch, exactly all the photos that we were able to get of the destruction, and the jury sentenced her to 18 years in prison. 18 years in prison. And that's where she is today. And I don't think there's a day that goes by that she regrets her decision that night. She regrets her decision that night because it cost the life of an innocent young man who was saving his money to open up his business, that was making plans to go to TAMIU. And in one night, it was over like that. It was over like that. You know, so you guys, as you all get ready here to finish your high school careers and go out and live your lives, be careful. Be careful. It's a dangerous place out there. The world's a dangerous place. Make arrangements. Have your parents. Take rides. Don't get in any vehicle where somebody's intoxicated, because believe me, it changes your life forever. And nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them. Nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them. And if you think that you're going to get sympathy from me in my office when you come in crying and saying, I never meant to do it, sir, there's not going to be any. Because my obligation is to the mother and the father, the brother and the sisters, who the very next day, November the 24th of 2011, was Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving. And Derek's favorite part of going to his mom, of having the turkey that his mom prepared, never came to be. Instead of having a beautiful Thanksgiving, they had a nightmare. And I see the mom today, and she tells me, Mr. Alaniz, every day, the door opens at the end of the day at 4:30, 5 o'clock. I think it's Derek. I think he's going to walk through the door. I still can't accept that my son is gone. You know, he was taken from me. And those are the factors, and those are the reasons, and those are the people I fight for. And that's why we need your help in making the right decisions, making the right choices, and just being good citizens. Thank you so much.